Okay, you guys, so second day of factoring with the leading coefficient. We call it leading coefficient 10, 2, 20. And yesterday we talked about factoring these numbers with a leading coefficient. So when you're factoring a trinomial with ax squared plus bx plus c, and we are factoring these type of trinomials, if they have a number in front that cannot be common factored out, then it becomes a little bit more tricky. That's where we're looking for using our, well, I like to call it the double smiley, right? I call it the double smiley. Landon calls it the upside down frowny, but that's because Landon he just doesn't like math. My own child. It's all right. It's all good. So how does it work? So we're going to factor this trinomial, and we talked about this in our Zoom meeting. Then I'm going to start off with parentheses, 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 right? Because I know I'm going to take it and factor it. So I need the parentheses to help factor it. Now, when I look at this problem, the first thing I want to do is identify the 2x squared. How do I make a 2x squared? Well, with a 2x times an x makes a 2x squared. And then, what about the multiples of 5? Well, I have to be careful about this. In our Zoom meeting, Caston said it totally right. If I put the 1 and the 5 here, it works. So I know the multiples of 5 are 5 times 1, but I could put that as a 5 times a 1, which is wrong, because I'm going to get 5x, 2x, or I can erase and go 1 and 5. How do I know that's right? Well, that's where I check with what I call my double smiley. Okay, so my double smiley here, and here is my outside and my inside. So this is how I check to make sure it's right. 2x times 5x is a 10x, and a 1 times an x is a 1x. When I add those together, I get my 11x, which is what I wanted for my middle term, and so this is the correct answer. Okay. So let's take a look at number 2, and of course these are the ones we did in class at Zoom, but that's okay, I want to do them again, just in case you didn't get it. So example 2, I have a leading coefficient. I have to, parentheses, parentheses, I'm going to put a 3x and an x, makes 3x squared. 3x times x makes my first term 3x squared, and the what times what makes a 1. Well, there's only one way to make a 1, and that's with a 1 and a 1. But I have to be a little bit careful on this next one, because my double smiley needs to make a negative 4. I need a negative 4. So let's check out my double smiley. So the way I have it set up right now, I'm going to get a 1 times x, 1x. 3x times 1 is a 3x. But I need a negative 4x. So if this were a negative and a negative, I think I'd have it. And I do know a negative times a negative makes a positive. So a negative 1 times negative 1 makes a positive 1. And that is the answer with my double smiley check. Okay? So again, if you were to multiply 3x squared minus 3x minus 1x plus 1, you get the original polynomial, trinomial. Okay, number 3. Same thing, we've got a leading coefficient. Let me put a 1 here to help me out. It's going to help me out a lot. Parentheses, 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 parentheses. The only way I'm going to get a 2x squared is with a 2x times an x. I need the multiples of 3, but it's a negative 3. So I have to be careful. And this is the one I think Emily got right, which is awesome. Nice job, Emily. Emily put the 3 here and the 1 here. Oh, no, this is the one Emily got right. Okay. So by doing this, I can get a 2x and a 3x. I might be able to make a negative 1. So let's check out our double smiley. Because our double smiley is what helps us find the middle term. Okay, so let's see. If I multiply this times this, I would get a 2x times 1 gives me a 2x. 3x times x gives me a 3x. I need a negative 1. So if this were a negative 3x and a positive 2x, when I add them together I can get a negative 3. The only way that's going to work is if this is a negative to make the negative 3x, and that's a positive to give me a positive 2x. Okay, we can check it. 2x times x, 2x squared. Positive 2x, negative 3x will add up to make my negative 1x, and negative 3 times a positive 1 makes negative 3. So that is my factored trinomial. Example 4. This one Emily got right. She got the hard one right. Here's what Emily said. We all know 3x and x. And there's a bunch of combinations for 16. There is, oh, this is a different problem. This is not the same one, is it? Oh, this one's a little bit different. Yeah. We got a 22 in there. All right, so let's see. 16, I could use an 8 and a 2. I could use a 4 and a 4 and a 16 and a 1. Well, I think if I put the 8 here, that'll give me a 24, right? I think if I put the 2 here, I'll get a 24 and a 2. And I think I might be able to get it. Let's check my double smiley. I need to make a positive 22. Let me check my double smiley here to make sure it's correct. I think there's a 2x. 24x, 3 times 8. I think if I were to make that positive and that negative, I have it. So I think I want a positive 8 and a negative 2. And then I can have a positive 22. That would be the correct answer to this one. That was a little bit harder. All right, I've got one more page I want to show you. Let me flip this over once you guys get that. Okay, let's look at my last page. All right, now this one's different. This one's different, okay? What I can do, and then this one you have to be careful on because there's an easier, much easier way. This one we can common factor. Okay, so I'm going to write it and I'm going to say it several times. Always common factor if you can first. Always common factor first if you can. Always common factor if you can. If, always common factor if you can. Well, I can, and it's going to make the problem so much easier. You see, they all have a multiple of 6. They all have a multiple of 6. So if I common factor out the 6, let's see what happens. So if I take out a 6 out of the x squared, 6x squared, I'm just left with the x squared. If I common factor out a 6 out of 12, well, 6 goes into 12 2 times. And if I common factor the 6 out of the 18, 6 goes into 18 3 times. Now why does this make it easier? Well, I don't have a leading coefficient because the 6 is on the outside. Now the 6 is part of the problem, but it's on the outside. So now I'm going to go back to just plain old trinomial factoring. I'm going to now try and factor x squared minus 2x minus 3. I know to make an x squared, I'll go x times x. I know the multiples of 3 are 3 and 1. If I had a negative 3 and a positive 1, I will get a negative 2. If you check your double smiley, I will get a negative 2. So if you can common factor, it usually makes the problem easier. So common factor if you can. Okay, so let me go ahead and, that whole answer is, you have to have the 6 because the 6 is part of the original problem, and then x minus 3, x plus 1. Okay, so how about the last problem? Okay, I got to solve for x, but what I notice, 5, 15, and 50 I notice I can common factor. So if I can common factor, I will. So I'm going to common factor out a multiple of 5. Let's see how that helps. Take out my 5. And I'm going to common factor out my 5 out of all of these terms. So if I take out a 5 out of a 5x squared, I'll just be left with an x squared. If I common factor out the 5 out of 15, I'll say, well, 5 goes into 15 3 times, or 3x. I'll common factor out of 5 out of 50, 5 goes into 50 10 times, or negative 10. All right? Equals 0. Now I know there's 2 answers. Has to be 2 answers because it's an x squared. Has to be 2 answers because it's 2x squared. So let's factor again. Leaving the 5 on the outside. I know I'm going to go x and x, because x times x makes my x squared. 5, leave the 5 alone, leave the 5 alone, ignore the 5 for right now. What times what makes 10? How about a negative 5, positive 2? How about a negative 5, positive 2? Okay, now I have my mini equations. So if I need 2 answers, I have 2 mini equations. The 5 is not an equation, it's just a 5. So my mini equations are here. This is my mini equation, and here's my other mini equation. So I want to find my mini equations. So x minus 5 equals 0, and my other mini equation is x plus 2 equals 0. All right, I can solve that. It's pretty easy. Plus 5, one answer is 5. That's a 0. Minus 2 to solve this, x equals negative 2. These are my zeros. Okay, that's all I have for today. I'll have you do the other half of that journal work, and then we just have to practice. There's only one way to get good at this, and that's practice, practice, practice.